In every generation, there's a machine that turns the ordinary act of motion into something that feels personal, something sculpted rather than assembled. You can tell it's special the moment you see the sweep of metal catching the light, the way its silhouette seems to float instead of roll. It's the kind of creation that makes city streets feel like galleries and daily commutes feel like rituals. Behind that elegance lies a quiet tension, the desire to preserve craftsmanship in a world racing toward automation and to keep human touch alive in an age ruled by efficiency. This story isn't just about a vehicle. It's about how design, heritage, and purpose can fuse into an icon that stands apart from trends and time. Stay with me, because what comes next is the evolution of that ideal. Proof that true luxury can move both body and soul. Like and subscribe if you enjoy these deep dives, and drop a comment on what masterpiece we should uncover next. The Vespa 946 is more than a scooter. It's a declaration of intent from Italy's most iconic two-wheeled brand. When it first appeared, it wasn't designed to chase volume or compete on price. It was created to remind the world what happens when industrial design and emotional storytelling share the same frame. To understand how the Vespa 946 came to life, we have to step back to the very roots of the Vespa lineage, to a post-war Italy that was desperate for mobility, efficiency, and dignity on two wheels. The first Vespa models were humble, mechanical solutions to a national problem, engineered with simplicity so they could be built quickly and maintained by anyone. Over the decades, that practicality evolved into a symbol of effortless Italian lifestyle, a blend of freedom, romance, and style that no other manufacturer could quite duplicate. Yet by the early 2010s, that magic risked fading. The scooter market had grown crowded, the competition cheaper, the designs more utilitarian. Vespa's heritage, so rich in its visual and cultural resonance, was in danger of becoming a museum piece. The challenge was clear: how to make a 70-year-old idea feel urgent again without betraying its roots. The Vespa 946 was born from that tension. Its name, 946, wasn't an arbitrary number. It was a direct reference to 1946, the year the first Vespa rolled onto the streets of Italy. This was not just a nostalgic nod, it was a mission statement. Vespa's designers, led by Marco Lambri and his team, began with the most sacred artifact in their history, the MP6 prototype, the streamlined, near-sculptural machine that inspired the very first Vespa. They studied its elegant contours, the raised tail, the floating seat, and the way the bodywork seemed to wrap around its mechanical heart like tailored clothing. But their goal wasn't to reproduce the past. It was to reinterpret it for a generation raised on smartphones and electric powertrains. That meant starting almost entirely from scratch. The Vespa 946's frame, for example, wasn't the classic pressed steel monocoque found on other models. Instead, it was formed from welded steel sheets and aluminum elements, an expensive, labor-intensive process more like coach building than mass production. This gave the 946 an impossibly clean silhouette, uninterrupted by visible seams or welds, and allowed its designers to sculpt shapes that would be impossible on an assembly line. Every curve, every edge was machined to perfection. Even the screws were custom-made to maintain the visual purity of the form. From a design standpoint, the 946 blurred the line between consumer product and functional art. Vespa treated it less like a vehicle and more like a piece of industrial couture. The hand-stitched leather seat, suspended elegantly over the rear wheel, wasn't just aesthetic, it was a direct callback to the early Vespa saddles, yet refined with modern ergonomics. The LED lighting, full digital display, and advanced ABS braking were all integrated so seamlessly that the technology never shouted for attention. You didn't look at the Vespa 946 and think gadget. You thought craft, and that was exactly the point. In a marketplace where scooters often sacrifice personality for practicality, the 946 set out to remind people that two-wheelers could still be aspirational. Yet beneath that refinement was a layer of controversy. The production cost was enormous, the price tag intimidating. Many questioned why a scooter, something once synonymous with affordability, would suddenly cost as much as a mid-range motorcycle. But Vespa wasn't trying to build transportation. They were creating desire. Each 946 was assembled by hand in limited runs, more akin to luxury fashion than mass manufacturing. The choice of materials, aluminum, leather, high-grade steel, made it clear. This was a statement piece for collectors and connoisseurs, not commuters. It's important to remember that by the time the Vespa 946 debuted, Vespa had already endured decades of reinvention. The company had survived economic crises, competition from Japanese manufacturers, and shifts toward plastic-bodied scooters. But nothing they had done before looked or felt like this. The 946 wasn't just modern. It was timeless in a way that made it instantly recognizable as both an homage and an evolution. Even the color schemes carried meaning. The Ricordo Italiano edition in deep red celebrated Italy's national pride, while the Emporio Armani collaboration years later underscored Vespa's connection to luxury fashion. Everything about this scooter was meticulously curated to project prestige, even exclusivity. The paradox, of course, was that the Vespa 946 wasn't built for the masses, but it was built to inspire them. The brand needed a halo product, a symbol that could lift the image of the entire lineup and remind buyers why the Vespa name still mattered. In that sense, it performed the same role as a concept car that actually goes into production. For enthusiasts, the 946 was proof that the brand could still innovate without betraying its DNA. For the industry, it was a reminder that design, when executed with sincerity and precision, can be as powerful as raw performance. Ownership of a Vespa 946 then became less about commuting and more about curation. Buyers treated it as an heirloom, a collectible object that would age gracefully, its value measured in design legacy rather than mileage. Vespa even encouraged that perception through limited edition runs tied to specific themes, such as the Bellissima and Red editions, each emphasizing different aspects of Italian culture. Philanthropy or artistry. The brand understood that scarcity drives fascination, and fascination fuels desire. For many owners, the 946 wasn't ridden daily. It was displayed, cared for, and admired, a tangible link to the past made vivid in the present. Still, underneath the gloss, there was practical engineering. The Vespa 946 featured an advanced single-cylinder, air-cooled four-stroke engine with fuel injection, offering smooth power delivery and excellent efficiency. The suspension geometry was revised for improved ride quality, and the braking system, dual-channel ABS with traction control, was among the most advanced ever fitted to a Vespa at the time. Even the smallest details, like the aluminum wheel hubs and machined controls, spoke to a design philosophy that valued permanence over cost-cutting. Every design decision reflected an awareness that, in a world saturated with disposable products, authenticity would become the new luxury. The 946 didn't need to compete with mass-market scooters. It needed to redefine what a scooter could be. That's what made it so polarizing and ultimately so important. As we move forward, the next part of the story looks at how this refined, almost spiritual approach to design rippled across the market, how it challenged perceptions of value and forced rivals to reconsider what luxury meant on two wheels. The Vespa 946 entered the global scene as a design manifesto, but its reception was anything but uniform. In the United States, where scooters often occupy a niche between urban practicality and lifestyle accessory, the Vespa 946 presented an unfamiliar proposition. For many riders, it seemed too precious to ride daily yet too enticing to ignore. The price, several times that of a standard Vespa, sparked debates not about performance, but about purpose. Yet, as with any daring idea, controversy fueled curiosity, and curiosity drew attention. The Vespa 946 was suddenly appearing in art galleries, fashion events, and luxury showcases. It wasn't just a scooter, it was a cultural ambassador for Italy's obsession with form and detail. While some saw it as an indulgence, others recognized it as a deliberate experiment in redefining what personal mobility could represent in a design-conscious world. Underneath that artistic veneer, the Vespa 946 was also a quiet statement about sustainability, an acknowledgement that craftsmanship and longevity can themselves be eco-friendly values. In a market overrun with plastic-bodied commuters and disposable electronics, here was something designed to be cherished for decades. That narrative resonated deeply with an audience tired of planned obsolescence. In cities like New York, Los Angeles, and Miami, design enthusiasts began to collect the 946, not as a commuter tool, but as a piece of rolling art. Vespa dealerships, typically filled with practical models, started featuring the 946 as a centerpiece, something to admire even if you never bought one. That strategy worked. The halo effect elevated the entire brand, reminding consumers that Vespa wasn't just another scooter company, it was a design house with a soul. Still, not everyone was convinced. Critics questioned whether the 946's limited production and artisanal methods could translate into lasting relevance. After all, exclusivity is a double-edged sword. Too much of it and you risk irrelevance. Too little and you lose the aura that makes something desirable. Vespa's response was subtle but effective. They let the 946's influence trickle down through design cues, material finishes, and technology in their broader lineup. Future models began to adopt similar attention to detail, a more refined aesthetic language that quietly echoed the 946's precision. The industry took notice. Rival manufacturers, once focused entirely on function, started investing more heavily in design departments, realizing that beauty sells as strongly as horsepower. The 946 had reframed the conversation. It demonstrated that a scooter could be aspirational, that two-wheeled transport could occupy the same emotional space as fine watches or bespoke fashion. For the tuning and aftermarket community, however, the Vespa 946 presented an unusual dilemma. Its design was so cohesive, so intentionally finished, that modification seemed almost sacrilegious. While traditional Vespa enthusiasts might personalize their rides with chrome, mirrors, or paint, the 946 inspired reverence instead of rebellion. Custom shops admired it more than they altered it. That alone spoke volumes about the purity of its execution. Even among collectors of classic Vespas, the riders who treasure vintage PX or rally models, the 946 found acceptance as a worthy descendant. It didn't try to replace history. It extended it. Vespa also cleverly built annual continuity into the model's release strategy. Each year, a new limited edition would surface, sometimes with a new colorway or collaboration. The Emporio Armani edition was perhaps the most high-profile, blending the minimalist aesthetic of the fashion house with the sculptural presence of the 946. That partnership wasn't just about branding. It was a clear articulation that Vespa saw itself in the same cultural space as luxury design. It was aligning with artistry, not simply transportation. Globally, the 946 became an aspirational export for Italy's manufacturing identity. It projected a narrative of patience, mastery, and self-confidence, qualities increasingly rare in mass-market production. The scooter became a kind of national emissary, promoting Italian craftsmanship in the same way a Ferrari or a handmade suit does, but in a form accessible to a wider range of admirers. In markets like Japan, where design precision and respect for tradition carry immense value, the Vespa 946 was celebrated as an example of monozukuri, the spirit of making things with care and pride. In Europe, design schools dissected it as a case study in blending retro form with modern requirements. It wasn't just a scooter anymore. It had crossed over into the realm of industrial art. Still, within the US market, the Vespa 946's challenge remained: how to communicate its purpose to a culture that often equates size or power with value. Vespa's strategy relied on storytelling rather than statistics. They leaned into heritage marketing, emphasizing the continuity from 1946 to the present, and presenting the 946 as a bridge between eras. It wasn't about speed, it was about significance. And in that sense, the 946 succeeded brilliantly. It became a touchstone for conversations about what luxury means in a world that's shifting towards sustainability and minimalism. More than once, it appeared in design competitions, exhibitions, and documentaries about craftsmanship. Even those who never planned to ride one found themselves admiring its purity of form. When electric mobility began gaining momentum, many wondered whether the spirit of the 946 would survive the transition. The answer, as we'll explore next, lies in how the 946 redefined Vespa's design language and business philosophy, paving the way for an entirely new generation of scooters that carry its DNA into the electric age while preserving the soul that made it iconic in the first place. The Vespa 946 marked a turning point not just for Vespa, but for how the entire industry perceives the intersection of heritage and innovation. When the scooter first arrived, many saw it as a boutique project, a collectible showpiece rather than a signal of future direction. Yet over the following decade, the Vespa 946 quietly became the blueprint for the brand's evolution. You can see its influence in nearly every design Vespa has released since. The way modern models incorporate clean surfaces, hidden seams, and minimalistic lighting traces directly back to the 946. Even the transition to electric power, embodied in the newer Vespa Elettrica, owes a conceptual debt to the 946's insistence that technology should never overwhelm elegance. The 946 was a proof of concept that luxury and sustainability could share a frame. It showed that refinement doesn't have to mean excess. It can mean discipline, restraint, and precision. That philosophy has rippled through Vespa's strategy, shaping how it positions itself in a marketplace now defined by environmental awareness and design credibility. The craftsmanship-first approach of the Vespa 946 also reignited conversations about what Made in Italy really stands for. In an era when global production networks scatter manufacturing across continents, Vespa's insistence on hand-built quality in Italy was both a cultural and commercial statement. It told the world that authenticity still matters, that provenance is as much a feature as performance. This message resonated far beyond scooters. Italian design houses, furniture makers, and even watch brands pointed to the 946 as an example of how heritage can evolve without compromise. But the legacy of the Vespa 946 extends beyond design or manufacturing. It reshaped the psychology of ownership. Traditional scooters are about mobility, about getting from point A to point B efficiently. The 946 reframed ownership as an emotional investment. When you buy something handcrafted, something built with visible care, you're not just purchasing utility, you're participating in a story. That's why even used Vespa 946 units remain desirable. Collectors see them as artifacts of a transitional moment when analog artistry met digital precision. The model has become a conversation piece, an object that communicates taste and appreciation for design history. In many ways, the 946 succeeded in doing what concept cars often fail to accomplish. It made a philosophical point in a tangible, usable form. It proved that luxury can be intentional rather than indulgent. The materials, the proportions, the detailing, every element was optimized for longevity rather than obsolescence. That's an ethos that resonates strongly in today's circular economy movement. Even as Vespa continues to develop electric and connected models, the 946 remains its moral compass. A reminder that good design starts with empathy for both user and maker. In the years since its debut, the 946's influence has quietly expanded across the two-wheeled landscape. Other manufacturers began to reinterpret their classics with the same level of artistry. Limited editions, retro-inspired models, and premium finishes began to appear everywhere. The 946 had normalized the idea that a scooter could be both nostalgic and futuristic, an object of utility and desire. It's not an exaggeration to say that the modern heritage luxury segment owes much of its credibility to the precedent set by this machine. Yet perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Vespa 946 is how it taught us to slow down. In a culture obsessed with instant gratification, it invited its audience to pause, to notice the stitching on the seat, the way light plays across polished metal, the seamless curvature of its frame. It was a masterclass in presence, proof that attention to detail can be a form of mindfulness. And that's where its impact becomes timeless. The Vespa 946 didn't chase innovation for innovation's sake. It pursued perfection through patience. It reminded both consumers and creators that technology should serve design, not dominate it. Even as electric mobility becomes the new frontier, that lesson remains vital. The electric scooters of tomorrow, quieter, cleaner, more connected, owe their design DNA to the standards set by the 946. The integration of sustainable materials, the balance between analog tactility and digital convenience, and the insistence on emotional design integrity all trace back to what Vespa achieved with this model. For riders today, the Vespa 946 represents an anchor in a rapidly changing world. It's a reminder that progress and preservation can coexist, that beauty, when built with intent, never goes out of style. As enthusiasts, collectors, and designers continue to reference it, the 946 lives on not just as a product, but as a philosophy. Its story concludes not with a period, but with an ellipsis, because its influence continues to unfold with every new Vespa that rolls out of Pontedera's factory gates. And that, perhaps, is the true triumph of the Vespa 946. It transformed nostalgia into momentum, proving that heritage, when handled with care, can still shape the future. For American riders and design lovers, the Vespa 946 occupies a rare space, a functional collectible that tells a story of craftsmanship in motion. When it first reached US shores, it defied nearly every convention of the scooter market. It was expensive, hand-built, and unapologetically artistic. But for those who understood its purpose, that price bought something intangible: authenticity. The Vespa 946 wasn't trying to be the fastest or the most practical. It was a cultural artifact that carried 70 years of Italian design evolution into the modern age. Today, it continues to serve as a benchmark for what small displacement luxury can look like. For potential buyers in the United States, the reality is that availability remains limited, and prices on the used market have stayed strong, especially for rare editions like the Emporio Armani or the red variant. Maintenance costs are reasonable thanks to Vespa's widespread dealer network, but replacement parts, particularly cosmetic components, can be costly due to their bespoke nature. Reliability has been excellent. The 946 uses proven Vespa mechanical architecture beneath its artistic shell, making it as dependable as it is beautiful. Ownership, however, is about stewardship more than utility. It's a machine that rewards care and attention, one that invites you to polish rather than park. That's part of its enduring charm. For enthusiasts considering a Vespa 946 today, the decision comes down to values. If you believe vehicles can carry emotion, that design and culture belong in the same conversation as performance, the 946 remains a worthy investment. It bridges eras, analog soul with digital refinement, old-world craftsmanship with new-world aspiration. For younger audiences, it serves as a masterclass in restraint, a reminder that technology should complement, not overshadow, human creativity. As the market shifts toward electrification, the lessons of the Vespa 946 will only grow more relevant. Its commitment to longevity and minimalism feels prophetic in an age defined by sustainability. It showed that luxury can be ethical, that beauty can emerge from simplicity, and that even a scooter can carry the weight of art. In the end, the Vespa 946 is less a machine than a manifesto, proof that when a brand remembers where it came from, it can still lead the way forward. Long after newer models have come and gone, the 946 will stand as a quiet testament to what happens when design, heritage, and purpose move in perfect harmony.